Lawmakers are telling the president they want a say in this drumbeat to military action. One of them is Senator Tim Kaine. He's a Democrat from Virginia. Joins us now. Senator, welcome to New Day. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Chris. You bet. Glad to be with you.
Let me ask you, do you believe the president can go it alone and make this decision unilaterally, or do you believe that this decision triggers the constitutional process of having a congressional vote?
Chris, the framers of the Constitution created an ambiguity, and they understood what they were doing. Congress has the power to declare war. The president's the commander-in-chief. Those framers, during the debates as early as 1787, understood that there could be emergency circumstances where the president would need to act prior to congressional action, but that Congress then would have to come in and ratify and approve what the president had done. So there are some circumstances where presidents, to defend the nation or to avoid a catastrophe, can act prior to congressional approval, but getting congressional approval is, in my view, constitutionally required. The president has been very prudent about this thus far. As you know, there's been urgings of the president to intervene militarily more directly in Syria before now. He's been very prudent about it. I think he should continue to be prudent, and that would involve in-depth consultation with Congress, answering some of the questions that have been asked. The Speaker Boehner, addressed a series of questions to the President today, and I hope that that dialogue continues, because when you get Congress on board, you have the best chance of getting the American public's support, and you also send those Americans and Virginians who are asking to fight wars, you send them in with the knowledge that the public and the political leadership of the country is fully behind them.
Well, we saw the president, then senator, standing up about this issue and saying that President Bush, criticizing him, saying you should have put this to Congress for a vote when he was dealing with Iran and came up with Iraq. Do you believe that Congress should come back early, that there needs to be a vote, that the president should not move forward without that authorization from Congress?
Chris, I definitely believe that there needs to be a vote. Whether or not the Congress needs to come back early, the inspectors are still on the ground in Syria. They're not scheduled to complete their report until over the weekend, and then they'll issue the report. We are scheduled to come back in session a week from Monday. I think there's ample work that the president can do in consultation with the congressional leadership about this until we're back. But I do think we are going to be back soon, and it would be completely consistent with the president's prudence up to this point for him to continue to have that dialogue. I mean, you know, again, I'm just struck by this as a Virginian. We are the most connected to the military of any of the states in terms of our veteran population, the soldiers and sailors and airmen and women and Marines who are here. Ships from Virginia are already deployed potentially to take action. We shouldn't ask people to fight war unless they know that they've got the full weight of our political leadership behind them and the American public supports the mission. And that presidential consultation with Congress over the next few days, I think, could be very critical in reaching a consensus that will then support whatever action needs to be taken.
Well, obviously, the issue of consultation versus a contingency, meaning that you have to have congressional approval, is something you'll have to figure out for yourselves. But let's talk about what the basis of it would be. There's been quick movement here. Since last Thursday, when we spoke to the president, he was unsure about linking chemical attacks to the regime. Now it seems like that is a certainty to the U.S. administration. But then comes word, just within the last few minutes, that there is concern within the intelligence community that the intelligence showing that the regime was responsible for these chemical attacks is not a slam dunk. Now, slam dunk, a little bit of a term of art. That's what we heard from then CIA Director George Tenet about WMDs in Iraq. It's a scary phrase. What does that mean to you, that the intelligence may not be a slam dunk, that we cannot show in the U.S. that the Assad regime, Assad himself, responsible for what was done?
Well, Chris, that's why it really is important to let the UN inspectors continue and complete their work. We have our own intelligence, the British do, and others do as well. But let's let the UN inspectors complete their work, because you're right. Congress does need, I believe, ultimately to weigh in and approve. But the real issue is, what is the mission? Use of chemical weapons violates a clear international norm that's been in place since the Geneva Convention adopted an anti-chemical weapons position after World War I. It is completely over the line for a government or any entity to use chemical weapons, and there has to be a consequence for it.
But let me ask you, Senator,
to determine.
Let me ask you, Senator, you know, because we have to be careful about the language. If the AP reporting is right and the intelligence community hasn't connected the call to use chemical weapons to Assad himself, that maybe it was a rogue operation by a member of the regime doesn't matter to you. If that's true, does it matter?
Those are important factors. Now, look, the question of whether it's a rogue element that ordered it or whether it was done in a chain of command, I don't think that you had to have Assad's signature on the order to hold him accountable for it. Again, the use of chemical weapons is a violation of clear international law. There has to be a consequence for it. If there's no consequence for it, we're sending the signal that that international norm now doesn't need to be respected, and we and humanity will reap the whirlwind if we don't have a consequence for this. But determining the consequence, the mixture of diplomatic, economic, and military strategies is important, and those strategies should be very focused, designed to deter and degrade the ability to use chemical weapons in the future.
Senator, help me with this. If the U.S. does what's being bandied about right now, and there's some type of punishing action done to the regime, but not to topple the regime, the rebels fighting against the regime include al-Qaeda elements right now. That's the understanding from the intelligence community. Wouldn't that then put us? Yes, they do. Wouldn't that then put the United States on the side of al-Qaeda in this conflict?
Well, Chris, that's why the president has been very prudent over the course of the last couple of years, despite calls for intervention. It is the case that the opposition probably now is militarily dominated by elements connected with al-Qaeda, and that's why it's been smart to be prudent. But the use of chemical weapons, there has to be a consequence for that. There is some possibility that chemical weapons could be used by the opposition. There's been some suggestion that they may have been in the past. I don't think the intelligence is good on that. But we want to make sure that if the opposition gains control of chemical weapons, they don't use them either. So the strategy and in tandem with our international partners is to deter the use of chemical weapons and to degrade the ability of any party in Syria to use those weapons in violation of international law.
But you believe that you and other members of Congress, congressional leadership, are aware that you may be giving advantage to al-Qaeda elements if you go in and damage the regime?
You know, Chris, what I've said, I'll say it again. What we need to do is take a limited action designed to deter the use of chemical weapons, either by the Assad regime or by the opponents, and to degrade the ability of those weapons to be used by any party. This is what is the changed fact on the ground. If that international norm has been violated, a norm that's been in place for 90 years and chemical weapons have been used, to have there be no consequence for that would be intolerable.
Senator, thank you very much for the discussion. Please come back to us here on New Day once you get the information from the president so we can keep the dialogue going for the American people.